What do you got for me today, Timmy?
Well, let's tell people about our podcast, John.
All right. What's the title of that podcast again? I'm bald.
I'm blind, and we're
Still
buddies.
We're buddies.
Awesome.
We've been friends for 30 years.
30 years.
What do you have for me today, Timmy C? How are you, my blind friend?
I'm good. It's a rainy day
This is
here.
your bald friend, by the way.
Yeah. Rainy day here in the Midwest. Gonna hit the road and head to our nation's capital this week, John. I'm pretty pumped.
How are you?
Yeah.
Is that for any particular reason or just because you want to go see DC?
Well, we want to see DC, and Peter is checking out a university out there, so that'll be cool.
DC is one of my favorite places. So they joke that, it's not by coincidence that DC was built on what used to be a swamp.
Yep.
But it is a neat town. Have you been before?
I have a long time ago.
Okay. I mean, we're only 100 miles, 125 miles as the crow flies to it. In fact, we're talking about going down for Easter break for a few days, which will be fun. So,
now, as the crow flies things, do you realize a crow would fly for a while and then run out of fuel and then crash to the ground? And so anything over, 30 miles as the crow flies, crows don't fly that way.
Is that right?
Well, I mean, they can't continuously fly.
Why not?
Because they're going to run out of energy and they're going to need to stop and eat and
but
drink.
Are you just arbitrarily picking the number 30?
Yeah, I'm just arbitrarily picking that.
Oh, okay. Well, it could very well be 250.
Yeah.
I mean, they can make a round trip from Philadelphia to DC.
Yeah.
So, all right. Everything good? How's your weekend, by the way?
It's good. Just prepping to go, kind of chill.
And the whole family's going to go?
Yep.
Okay. And I suppose Peter and Blue Leaf will drive, and you guys just kind of hang out, right?
Yeah. I was at the DMV getting a license the other day, and I was standing in line. I'm like, "Is this where I line up for my road test?" And I got my seeing eye dog there. I thought it was funny.
It is funny, and that is so you because when you texted me the other day, and in fact, I was going to talk about this on the podcast, where you were like, "I'm at the DMV," and I was like, "Oh, exactly for what?" But I'm not so sure,
Yeah.
but did you had to get a real ID, I guess?
I actually failed in the process. So the website, this is trivia. The website said you needed such and such, and then it turns out I showed up there and needed 2 proofs of residency.
Yeah, I saw that. You need like your utility bill and your mortgage statement.
Yeah.
Or something like that.
Something like that. So I actually have to go back. So nothing worse than a trip to the DMV followed by another trip to the DMV.
Right. And if you could squeeze in the IRS in there, that'd be a perfect trifecta, right? Yep. Well, the Babylon Bee actually had a thing that I sent out. I think I sent it to you today, and it said, "Man in line at DMV gets to experience trainee's first day on the job all the way to the retirement party." After arriving at 8 a.m. to begin waiting in line, Stevens had the opportunity to see Taylor process her very first driver's license renewal, learn the ropes of the job, get promoted, take maternity leave twice, and ultimately retire to spend more time with her grandkids. So anybody who has been to the DMV can relate to that.
Yeah.
That joke, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, well, anyhow, Timmy, we had a trivia question last week that I wanted to answer. And you have one from a listener, do you not?
I do. Yep. The answer.
Okay. Oh, you have the answer. That's right. Kirk submitted it. Yeah. And you wanted to mention, I think Kirk is doing a podcast, right? He's a friend of the show. We can promote that.
Yeah, I think so. The podcast is the Lawyer's Guide to the Galaxy. And I believe friend of the show, Ben, is on that at times too. I don't know if he's a co-host or...
Have you ever seen the Christmas card from a lawyer?
No.
It's one of the funniest things you'll ever see. And anyone who is a lawyer will appreciate this because it's like, Merry Christmas and Happy New Year, not to the exclusion of other holidays, but as a recognition of when it goes through this whole thing. It's like, please refer to addendum B1, subsection C to understand the implications of this and blah, blah, blah. It's like 4 paragraphs long to say Merry Christmas, Happy New Year.
Yeah.
So, but why don't you do the trivia question? Kirk submitted it, and it was the only football game that was actually
played in the metric system by NCAA teams, and it was St. Olaf College and Carleton College.
Now, are they in Minnesota, St. Olaf?
I think they're both in Minnesota, yeah.
Okay. And what year was that? It was like 19... I looked it up because
I think it was 77, was it?
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Is there a particular reason? Are they engineering schools? I actually was going to guess Harvard and Yale.
Yeah.
Because Harvard and Yale are notorious for being pranksters and against each other. Like the tradition of the Harvard-Yale football game apparently goes back hundreds and hundreds of years, and people who are graduates of either university take it very seriously. I was actually anticipating that it was going to be that, but it was not. So I looked it up, and that's when I saw the answer.
No, I think it was, let's push, the future forward with a metric football game. And they're two, relatively small liberal arts colleges, I believe. So.
And they can pull it off without sort of blowback, as it were. Yeah. Well, before I give the answer to my trivia question, which was, what is the only state capital without a McDonald's? I do want to particularly call out a friend of the show who wrote in on your website or on your link to Substack, right?
Yep.
My mother-in-law,
yes,
by the name of Kathy Pocious, who called out and said, thank you for the shout out to my mother-in-law. And of course I'm going to do it again. So I'm going to doubly embarrass her. But she said, if you need evidence that I enjoy the show and that I listen to it, there you go.
There you go.
That's great. Yeah. But the answer to last week's trivia question, Timmy, you want to take a guess?
Oh, you told me. So it was the state capital that doesn't have a McDonald's, right?
Right. And it is the state capital of Vermont, which I had always thought was pronounced Montpelier. But now with Alexa and Siri, you can actually ask, and it's actually pronounced Montpelier. Montpelier. That is the only state capital without a McDonald's, which is just an interesting, silly tidbit. So if you're in Montpelier and you're in the mood for a sausage McMuffin with cheese, you're SOL, or you're up the river without a paddle.
Do you know, is there a reason?
I don't. I didn't give it that much research, to be perfectly candid. Maybe I will.
Yeah.
But I think it's, probably just reflective of the fact that it's small.
Yeah.
It's one of the smaller states and just probably doesn't have the demographics for it. I know, for instance, that Trenton. So like when a team like the New Jersey Devils won the Stanley Cup a few years back, this is going back at least a decade or more, you normally have a ticker tape parade through downtown. Well, and they usually do it in the state capital. There's no real town that defines New Jersey. It's really just kind of suburbs of New York, if you will, and suburbs of Philadelphia. The top is the suburbs of New York. The south is the suburbs of Philadelphia. So they had a parade through downtown Trenton, which is the capital, but it wasn't exactly the most exciting thing you've ever seen. So just unique, odd instances with that with state capitals. But I'm always fascinated by geography, so that's why I always include it.
Yeah.
But opening day, George Will, as you know, one of my favorite columnists, he always talks about the best words in the English language are pitchers and catchers report, which comes in February, because it means that baseball is right around the corner. And opening day is always sort of symbolic to me of hope. And, every team, regardless of whether or not you're the White Sox who broke the single season losing record last year, or you are the Los Angeles Dodgers who won the World Series, which, by the way, we had this discussion. It's not the World Series. It is the national championship. But that being said, opening day is very symbolic, and I always enjoy it tremendously. So the question I have is do you know which pitcher, and it's a pitcher of note. It's not somebody that's like, off the ash heap of history. And I suppose by definition, it would be such, because what pitcher started the most opening day games in Major League Baseball history? It's a Hall of Famer, relatively recent, somewhat inside of our lifetime, meaning when we were very, very young. He retired, but you want to take a guess?
Nolan Ryan.
That was that was my first guess, and the answer is incorrect. That is incorrect. Yeah, but that was my guess as well. Yeah. So, what are we talking about today, Timmy?
Well, first of all, John, I want to make it clear that this podcast has never received money from USAID. Because if you don't have your integrity, what do you have? I guess maybe you need lots of money, right? Well, that brings us to our topic today, which is Columbia University.
Well, universities writ large.
I think Columbia is a good example.
Is very much a good example. Yeah. And explain what's been happening and why it's so dismaying.
So basically, what was it, almost a year and a half ago, Columbia probably, you could say, mismanaged student protests. Students took over a building. I don't think they suffered much consequences. There were reports of anti-Jewish treatment of other students. And so that's the thing they did in the past. So recently, the Trump administration said, well, you know what? We're holding $400 million for research. How about you make some changes on your campus? And the question was, well, what does Columbia do? And it turns out Columbia just bows and gives in. And this is fascinating to me on a couple levels, because Columbia has a $14.8 billion endowment. If you were just to conservatively invest that, with prevailing interest rates of 4%, that's over $530 million in interest a year. So if anybody could weather this, it's Columbia. If anybody could stand up for integrity or whatever their principles are, it's Columbia. And you know what they did? They just caved.
They did. And I suppose this is something that you and I are going to be in agreement on certain things, and I'm going to come at it from a different perspective as well, but I think we'll have some similarities and some differences. And, you know, one of the things that I always am reminded of, and there is a great line, that your ethics and your principles are only matter if and when they're decidedly inconvenient. Mm-hmm. Meaning it's really easy to pay lip service to this, that, and the other thing. And then when what hits the fan, you suddenly just change your tune 180 degrees. That's to a certain extent what politicians do. I get that. That's in their nature. That's what they're, hired to do. I am disappointed beyond belief with Columbia's treatment of Jewish students. This was basically, there was a number of uprisings blaming, the Jewish students for mistreatment of Hamas. Again, two things can be true at the same time. You may have problems with how Israel treats Hamas, with how they're treating Gaza, whatever it may be. That doesn't give you license to discriminate against Jewish students at Columbia University. That's first and foremost. Mm-hmm. So they clearly failed post October 7th, 2023, which is when the attack on Israel happened, to protect Jewish students. So there is some merit to what conservatives have argued, and you won't hear me disagree, that universities are sort of this bastion of just entitled liberal thought that gets away with it and nobody's asking any questions. Show me another business that has that, right? Mm-hmm. That being said, however, if you actually believe that you had done nothing wrong, or, to your point, you had ethics or principles about this, tell the Trump administration to stick it in their eye. And I would say the same thing if it was the Biden administration. This has nothing to do with Democrat versus Republican. But to me, what is so dismaying is very much along the same line. I liken this to DE&I. All these companies that paid what I will affectionately refer to as lip service, if it's even that, to this DE&I principle, as soon as Trump came in, they disbanded it, which shows you how dedicated or committed to DE&I they were in the first place, right? Mm-hmm. Well, the same basic thing applies with universities. If you actually believe in academic freedom and you're not going to be bullied, by a higher up, as it were, whether it be Trump or fill in the blank, then stand your ground. And if there is a university, to your point, that could do it and could afford to do it, it's Columbia University. They have almost a $13 billion endowment. Just the interest on that alone is, rivals the GDP of some mid-sized to small-sized countries, right?
Yeah. Yes. And I think, this just points out how corporatized universities are. And there doesn't seem to be a goal beyond financial success or prestige, right? That's it.
Here. And one of the things that I lament, and I've seen it firsthand, you and I have both worked in the university environment, is Father Hesburgh, who has since passed. He was the president of Notre Dame University for 35 years, right? He had served on the Civil Rights Commission. He marched with Martin Luther King. He was involved in sort of he put his money where his mouth is, affectionately. And this was university presidents across the spectrum. The chancellor of UCLA in the 1960s during the riots stood up against the students. Ronald Reagan, who was then governor, was pushing for it, but UCLA stood their ground. They actually had a purpose and a belief system. Now they just seem to be fundraisers. University presidents just seem to be fundraisers in chief. And believe me, I am not one of these people who's going to say, oh, it's just money. No, I understand. Money makes the world go round, and I'm not minimizing it. But when you have the ability, which Columbia clearly does, having a $13 billion endowment, to say, we don't need your $400 million, and you're not going to tell us how to run a department. And that's one of the things that really makes me just almost want to scream to the heavens. The Trump administration wants to put a particular department, meaning I believe it's Middle Eastern Arabic Studies in Columbia University, into receivership, so that they have to monitor everything and get approved for this and for that, and blah, blah, blah. One of my friends used to say, being a manager sometimes is about managing people out of their job. You just make their life so uncomfortable they ultimately quit. Well, that's essentially what I think the Trump administration is trying to do with Columbia. And if you actually believe in academic freedom, stand your ground here and say no. But nope, they rolled over like a sack,
Yeah, it makes, and the other thing I think to think about is there are folks, especially on the left, who will say cancellation isn't a thing; it doesn't exist, right? So J.K. Rowling says things that folks in support of trans disagree with, and she doesn't appear on the special, right? The Harry Potter follow-up special. And they're like, well, she just got a consequence for her actions. She wasn't canceled.
she wrote the book. I mean,
yeah. So, but then when Columbia, doesn't protect its Jewish students, right? It lets protesters run all over it. And the feds are like, you know what? You don't need $400 million, right? Isn't that sort of the same thing? Like, I don't necessarily agree with either quid pro quo, but like, it seems like the same thing.
What's good for the goose is good for the gander, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the New York Times got in some hot water during the election season last year, about a year and a half, maybe a year ago, when Senator Tom Cotton, I'll repeat this, Senator Tom Cotton, who went to Harvard, served in the military. You may not agree with his political stance, but they published an op-ed by Tom Cotton in the New York Times back, I think it was in July of 24, so maybe about 9 months ago, in which he essentially said, look, it may be time to legitimately consider calling up the National Guard, even active military troops, to deal with the border crisis. And the New York Times readers made such a lament about it that the editor of the New York Times kowtowed, buckled, and said we shouldn't have invited Senator Cotton. This is a senator in the United States.
Wasn't that about BLM?
It could have been both. I don't remember, but I do remember one of the call-outs that he had in there was about militarizing.
Yeah.
And again, trying to silence people you disagree with is not the answer. You're not going to get what you want. In fact, you're only going to make it worse. And so this is where I'm frustrated. If the Trump administration basically says, look, we're going to cut off $400 million unless you protect Jewish students, here, I'm all for that, because it's clear to me that they were failing in that. And if they had just acted like adults and said, we run this place, not you, to these students, things would have been fine. Where I get concerned is when they start to particularly target certain things. And it goes back to my question about DE&I and these DOJA cuts, because it seems like they're ready, shoot, aim. It's throwing spaghetti against the wall. I don't see a rhyme or reason other than it's just payback for things they don't like. And that's what makes me nervous. If they're going after particular speakers, particular departments, that's when it becomes problematic to me. And that's what they've begun to do. And by Columbia University kowtowing and basically saying, yeah, we'll do whatever you want, give us back the $400 million, it gives license to the Trump administration to keep going and push further. Am I wrong?
I agree with you. And I think there's another thought to this, that the current system, the way they caved just highlights how fragile the current system is.
Or how dedicated they are to actually what they believe.
Yeah.
I mean, how weak are your morals that you roll over within 3 days?
Right. Well, and just the notion that research depends on this steady flow of money redistributed via the federal government to researchers, right? I forget who said the quote. I want to say it's Reagan, that every dollar has a string that leads back to Washington, right? And you have your sanctuary cities who think they can do what they want and then still get federal money. Like, this is what happens when you're dependent on government.
Hochul about this. The governor of New York. You have to, if federalism, government writ large, whether it's, federal government, state government, local government, depends upon good faith effort and understanding between the two. You may not agree with them. I don't agree with President Trump. Yeah. He is the president of the United States. The office takes precedence to me over that. His time in it, hopefully, is finite.
Right.
The reality, though, is Liz Cheney said this about the people that justified what happened on January 6th. The stain of your disgrace will last long beyond when Trump leaves office. And there is something to that. And this is the other side. This is liberals doing the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Am I wrong, Tim?
I agree. And the other thing I think to think about is, again, this just highlights how crazy the system is, that the federal dollars fund the research, and then often big pharma sweeps in, finishes the job, makes the profits. And like, there are other ways to fund research, through the American Cancer Society and the American Heart Association. Like, it doesn't, just because you say federal government isn't funding it or isn't funding it as much, doesn't mean it's not a priority or we can't do it. Like, there's this notion that we just need the steady stream of federal dollars, and you're seeing that played out here.
Right. Same thing happened. And this is not just, and again, maybe Columbia is such a unique case because of the protest that targeted Jewish students, which, again, you and I will say unequivocally, it is wrong. Mm-hmm. These students should be disciplined. There should be consequences for these actions. I'm okay with the Trump administration basically saying, tighten security and make sure you do it better, or we're taking money. Where, again, I have a problem is if they start to target particular speakers, which apparently they've done with some sort of French academic, with a professor at Georgetown. They had ICE arrest him over the weekend. This stuff reeks to me of sort of the purge under Stalin. This is dangerous, right?
I'm also in favor of, let's not have identity concealing masks on campus. Like the only time you'd put on a mask was when you were like going to rob a bank or blow snow.
Explain to me, what do you mean by that? Are these students walking around?
Yeah, so Trump, one of the requirements for Colombia was that they would ban the masks that protesters would use to conceal their identities when they were protesting.
Oh, God.
So, yeah. So it's like, well, if you're
somebody
shows
protest, up with a bandana over their face, you assume they're robbing the place,
yes,
right? I mean,
yes,
to your point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So like, I'm a fan of that too. Like, if you're going to protest, show your face. Like,
yeah, that is part and parcel of sort of the internet makes it possible for anyone and everyone to have an opinion, and there's no consequences. Yeah. If you're going to actually stand for what you believe, put your name to it.
Yeah.
Let us see your face, right?
Yeah.
Well, Matt Taibbi, he is sort of a contrarian. He's a well-known author. He is somebody who likes to, for lack of a better term, stick it in the eye of authority. And he wrote an article in response to this whole thing. And he tends to be liberal, libertarian. He tends to be on my side a little bit more than yours. Do you think that's a fair representation, Timmy?
I think that's fair.
Okay. And, no one fits into one perfect ideologue box or whatever it may be, but I think it's fair to say that. He wrote an article called The Angst of the Well-Endowed, basically talking about universities. And he's saying, look, first and foremost, all of these sort of the sky is falling narratives need to have context. And he calls out, number one, that Columbia has a $13 billion endowment. They're only losing $400 million. If you take it, if you see them side by side, you start to feel less sorry for them. The same thing with Harvard. They're proposing taking $700 million from Harvard. Do you know what Harvard's endowment is? $53 billion. Say that again, $53 billion, right? And he has a fabulous line in this article because, again, I think two things can be true at the same time. I think universities are fabulous. They are needed for research. They're needed for all these other things. But I also think universities have lost their way over the last 30 years and become nothing but sort of fundraisers in chief, as it were. They're putting up new buildings. They're doing all these other things. If you want to criticize the healthcare system saying, we're paying this person $10 million a year, this person $12 million a year, has life expectancy gone up? No. Well, the same should be true with universities in reverse. Tuition is going up 10, 12, 14, 15, 18%, whatever it may be annually. Have we seen any sort of net improvement in academic performance? Are we winning more Nobel Prizes? The hard truth, unfortunately, is no. And Matt Taibbi writes, and I agree with this. Let me know your thoughts, Timmy. He says, still, paying taxes to subsidize high tuition, gaudy construction on campus, and an explosion of non-academic labor might actually be tolerable if universities were actually educating the young and conducting good research. Schools have instead become public-private hodgepodges, existing in what Austin Powers might affectionately call a consequence-free environment, responsive neither to the market, which would of course demand superior teaching and or affordability, nor voter preferences. They simply compete on status, handing out degrees in self-obsession and intersectional horseshit that are useful only for upper-class networking and not much else. What say you, Tim? Because to me, that sentence pretty much tells you everything you need to know.
Absolutely. I mean, can you go to a university and get a good education? Sure. Can you learn things that you wouldn't have easily elsewhere? Yeah. But there's a lot of bloat and waste in the whole process these days. It's tremendous. Peter
Thiel, who, is a big backer of J.D. Vance and an advocate of Elon Musk, he has basically, and he's a billionaire, he helped found, I believe, PayPal with Elon Musk. Mm-hmm. He has said the university system is so broken it needs to be destroyed and reconstructed.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm prepared to throw the baby out with the bathwater, but again, I think universities should be about challenging conventional wisdom, doing, cutting edge research, finding improvements in quality of life, these types of things. I'm not necessarily sure. And again, I think there is a value in seeing diverse viewpoints, whether that be about transgender rights and things of that nature. To that end, by the way, Trump is also withholding money from the University of Pennsylvania because of this swimmer, Leah Thomas, this young lady young man who now, is biologically a male, but identifies as a woman and is swimming in women's. There's something to that. I think Trump, and there is sort of resonance with voters about this, that I don't want young men or what are biologically young men competing against my daughters in sports. And, to me, that, though, is just sort of, again, it's his retribution tour. And that's where I get nervous about how far is this going to go. And when a university rolls over as quickly as Columbia did, and they don't have to, that's the thing, it tells you that, A, they aren't serious about what they actually say. And secondarily, it's really only about the money, right? I always used to say, when you hear an athlete say, oh, it's not about the money, it's about respect, it's about the long. The reason they have to say it's not about the money It's about the money.
Right.
What do you think of that Matt Taibbi quote?
I think it makes a lot of sense. And the other thing to think about is that comes up in this Trump era is the opposite of a bad idea may not be a good idea. Right. So
well, that's the inverse. I always say, and this is one of the things that drives me nuts about liberals. The opposite of the perfect piece of legislation or perfect bill is not the good piece of legislation. Right. You got to take what you can get. I mean, Obama, to his ever dying credit, will always be in the pantheon of great presidents to me, because he basically said, get me 65 to 75% of what I want in the healthcare bill, and I'll call it a success. That's progress. But to your point, the opposite is also true.
Yeah. So these institutions have just gone completely off the rails. But I don't know if, what you describe as a particularly not focused reactionary response is the right thing. But reeling them in, right? I think there's this middle ground in America where reasonable people can compromise and agree and say, they've gone too far at Columbia, and I don't know if these Trump demands are too far the other way, but I think that's the problem we're in, is we're so polarized that we do the wrong thing in one direction, then we do the wrong thing in the other,
Right. In order to bring the pendulum back into balance, you go to the other extreme. Yeah. No question. And to that point, Bret Stephens, do you know Bret Stephens? He used to be the managing editor of the Jerusalem Times. He's an immigrant born in Mexico who is half Jewish. He wrote for the Wall Street Journal for a number of years. He now writes for the New York Times, and he is one of my favorite authors. He's in the pantheon with David Brooks and George Will and those guys I quote with some regularity. And he basically said, look, the funding cuts at Columbia, where anti-Semitism has flourished since October 7th, do not bother me. They're not entitled to the money, and he's referring to Columbia. They have a multi-billion-dollar endowment. Figure it out, he said. Now, and this is where the rubber meets the road for me, and this is essentially, I think, what Matt Taibbi was talking about. If this becomes a general assault on higher education writ large, then I'm going to be much more worried. And again, that's where I'm starting to get nervous, when you're targeting particular departments, particular speakers, particular universities, as opposed to universities across the pantheon. I find that to be problematic.
Right.
So to me, Timmy, what do you think of that Bret Stephens quote? Because I like to have people that I don't necessarily agree with, but that can justify their viewpoint. Hence why you and I are friends. Right. But why I get concerned about the fact that they just kowtowed so quickly and over what, in the grand scheme of things, is minuscule funding.
Right. Well, I think in a lot of areas, there are great bodies of knowledge in higher ed in areas that have been really co-opted by ideas which are actually antithetical to the discovery of truth.
Example. Give me an example.
Yeah. I think, for example, critical theory.
Critical race theory.
Yeah. I think that.
But couldn't that be reduced down to a simple essence, which is recognizing that certain groups have had it better than others? Meaning, I, as a white male, probably shouldn't be bitching about stuff. I always joke, these are first world problems, right?
Right.
I'm not saying by virtue of me being white, though, that makes me evil and that I have to inherit all the sins of my ancestors. But it is a recognition that I haven't had it as tough as, say, a female or a minority. Isn't that the distillation of it?
No, I don't think so. I think it's that all history is about oppressor and oppressed. And that you can bring.
There's an element of truth to that. I mean, have you turned on the History Channel? War sells.
Well, but here's the problem, John. There is an element of truth to that, but there are other truths which are just as valid. That humans are social creatures, and we build communities, and we expand and reach across difference, and like all those things. And so, critical race theory sort of locks that out. And there are also those.
I see what you're saying. Right? It's this or this and nothing else, and everything else is excluded.
And I think. And there's we talked about in our last podcast, there's sort of a buying into rather poor quality research in favor of certain politically popular premises, right? And those things, I don't know if it can be saved, the system. Peter Boghossian, he's a professor who left he's a philosophy professor. He left one of the universities in Oregon, I think. I'm blanking on which one. He talks about this a lot. And there really are folks who aren't sure if you can save the modern university. I hope you can, but I'm not sure.
But that also lends itself to the question as, in its current construct, are you willing to say we should save the universities? And if you had asked me this 30 years ago, I'd say absolutely. But in their current construct, I'm not sure either.
Yeah.
Because I'm not sure that students are getting their value, because most classes, the vast majority of professors on campus are either teaching assistants or, like myself, an adjunct professor who is not tenured. Tenure is nothing to do with the teaching quality. It has to do with their academic research and writing. And the best example I give is universities would much rather have someone who is a particular expert in 16th century Romance poetry from 1550 to 1575 than somebody who's well read on issues across the spectrum, right? That can speak eloquently about, philosophy or English or German or sports or fill in the blank, right? And so I'm not sure that the university setting, until people start asking questions, and I've been saying this though for 25 years, that it has to break, right?
Right.
But it doesn't. It's a guaranteed stream of revenue because, to Matt Taibbi's point, it's all about the cachet, and everyone needs a college degree now. Mm-hmm. So it's much more about image than actual education. Is that not a fair sort of statement?
I think that's very fair. So
okay, all right. What would you do? What is another example that you think of a department or of an area that has been co-opted? And I'm sure you're going to point out DE&I, and I agree with it. Well, I've read multiple articles about this.
So over 50% of psychological research doesn't reproduce.
What does that mean?
So if you do a study and you try to repeat it,
you're not going to get the same results.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And if you look, Jonathan Haidt has done work on this. The academy skews so far left.
Certain departments. I do want to preface this because this is one of the sort of boilerplate things that Republicans, although I do believe they have merit about universities, certain departments, the liberal arts department and so forth, skew heavily left. There's no question about it. But, even Arthur Laffer, who created what is affectionately called the Laffer curve, has said it's a self-defeating mechanism as it relates to economics. So you can't simply throw out boilerplate language and say tax cuts pay for themselves. They do up to a point.
Right.
So you can't just say that academics are always liberal. Certain departments are, no question about it.
I actually think you can say they all lean left, but how far they lean, I think you actually could say that.
All right, but there's gradations and variants, right? Okay. Yeah. All right, fair.
So we get research on things like microaggressions, which we talked about, and, which are contrary to sort of one formulation of how you think of how the brain works and how to work with the brain. And so I think, psychology is also an area that, Jordan Peterson has run into this as a psychologist, that, you can't think and speak freely. And that, to me, is a core value of a nation and a university. So.
Oh, God, that's the whole purpose of a university. If you're not going to have an open dialogue in a university, where are you going to have it? Because it's certainly not going to be in corporate America.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Well, I think, again, I'll leave with this basic overarching thought. I'm okay with universities having to answer certain questions that they have been able to avoid for at least 2 to 3 decades. Where I get concerned is if there's particular targeting, and that's what's come as a consequence, and maybe the universities themselves have to blame, which is, they rolled over like a sack of potatoes as soon as there was a threat to this spigot of money.
Well, and they rolled over letting in DEI so many years ago. So they just keep rolling over, John.
Right, but the attestation to it and their quick, revocation of it speaks to how sincerely they thought about it, right?
That's true.
Yeah. So it's like, I don't know if you noticed, by the way, but the NCAA tournament is going on, and I just love the basketball tournament because it is about, what happens on the court. Rankings don't matter, school names don't matter. There's upsets left, right, and center, right? Mm-hmm. And I've noticed since name, image, and likeness, and since students have been able, these quote unquote student athletes have been able to garner more power, that the NCAA is on a full media blitz talking about how all academic scholarships are guaranteed now. And I'm thinking to myself, now, why weren't they before?
Right.
And it just speaks to the duplicitous nature of universities writ large, and it makes me so unhappy. So,
yeah. So John, we're constantly evolving as a nation, right? And Bald Blind Buddies, we're at the cutting edge here. So last week we talked about how the governor of Wisconsin was trying to remove some gender-specific language from the state budget and things like that. So we have gone ahead and started to modify common songs and things to make them more palatable. Would you like to hear one we're working on?
Absolutely.
So this one is a camp song. You may recognize it. I'm not going to sing it. I'll just tell you the words. Hello, parent who gave birth to me. Hello, other parent. Greetings from camp, land acknowledgement. Things are cold here, but with climate change, we think that's more than a little strange. So we're working on this, John. We're going to help rewrite all these common camp
as
songs.
As you said, hello, person who birthed me, I knew it was hello, mother.
Yep.
Hello, father.
Yeah. There we go.
Oh,
so we're working on it here.
Touche. Well, Timmy, I have a whack job this week. You have a hero, right?
I do.
Okay, excellent. So my whack job, and again, we're lamenting universities, and it seems to me in an affectionate way, and again, I'm not equating this to prisoners, but you can't let the prisoners run the prison, right? And the students shouldn't be the ones who are running the universities. I'm not saying that they shouldn't have a voice. I'm just saying that they shouldn't be the ones running. And it seems that universities have sort of cowed out. It's like parents. They let their kids tell them what they're going to eat for dinner and all these other things. No, right?
Right.
So to that end, the same thing applies, I think, in all aspects of life, which is where are the adults? There is a time, place, and manner for certain behavior. And there is no question the Republican Party writ large feels like, and I think, remarkably accurately so, that they have a winning issue by constantly focusing on gender and this idea of biological men competing against women and what have you, right? But there is a congresswoman from Delaware. Delaware is a small state, so there's 2 senators, but only 1 representative. She is the first openly transgender representative to win election to Congress. And, whether you agree with it or not, it is a step, right? The first homosexual, the first Black, the first Hispanic, the first this, the first that. It's a testament to the evolving nature of our feelings. Her name is Sarah McBride. She is an adult well into her 30s or 40s. She has openly identified as transgender. I don't know if she's on sort of medications for this or if she's actually had a sex change, but she is openly transgender. Respect that. If you don't want to respect it for 16-year-olds, 14-year-olds that have gender dysphoria, I can work with you there. But respect that as an adult, right, Timmy? So there is a fellow by the name of Keith Self, a 72-year-old man who is the Republican representative from the 3rd District of Texas, who chairs a particular committee in the House. And he made it a point last week to refer to Representative McBride as Mr. McBride. That seems to me to be just childish behavior. Be the adult. You may not agree with it. I don't agree with President Trump, but he's the president, right? Respect the office. If she is an openly transgender woman who's asking you to identify her as female, do so. Be the adult. Don't be the child. So my whack job this week is Keith Self for specifically calling out Representative McBride as Mr. McBride. Grow up.
And if we want to have civil discourse, we should at least start by being civil. Right? Like,
fair enough. Yeah. The civil part. There's a reason they call it civil discourse and not discourse civil. Civil comes first, not discourse.
Yeah. So let's treat each other with respect.
What do you think of that, Tim? Do you agree with me on that? I mean, I understand why it really is right now a winning issue. And if you need further evidence of that, Gavin Newsom, who should be a surprise to no one, is likely to run for president in 2020. Had a podcast with Steve Bannon this week. He's now started a podcast, and he specifically called out this issue and said Democrats have to embrace the idea that maybe we're wrong on this, that we shouldn't let biological men compete against women in sports. And again, if the fate of a $25 trillion economy comes down to an issue which to me is this asinine, just get over it.
Right. Yeah. Treat each other with respect. I will say I have a lot of concern about spaces which have been reserved for biological females.
Okay, but all I'm asking is he just did that to be a jerk. He called her Mr. McBride.
Yeah.
If he had a purpose behind it or he had a religious issue or whatever it may be, and again, I'm not excusing that, but give her the respect she's earned. She's an elected representative. She identifies as female, and it's not like she's 12. She is a full-grown...
We're paying him to collaborate and govern. We're not paying him to trade insults, like
I know.
Do your job, man.
I know. So Representative Keith Self from the 3rd District of Texas, just because of it. I don't know the man from Adam, and I come to find out he was born in my fair city of Philadelphia, but he lives in Texas, which most reasonable, smart people have left the cold of the Northeast and moved south and west from the Frost Belt to the Sun Belt. Right. I hope to join him someday.
All right, so this hero, there's a little wind up here. So there's a book, John, or a short story. Did you ever read Jack London's To Build a Fire?
I read Jack London. I did not read that one, though. He also wrote, what were some of the other ones that he wrote?
Call the Wild is his most.
Call the Wild, there you go. Thank you. I was going to say Into the Wild, but that's the John Krakauer. Yeah, that's right. I did read that, and that was in 3rd or 4th grade, yeah.
So he has a short story about a man who's walking through the Yukon, and basically falls and gets wet and needs to build a fire to dry himself out. And catastrophe after catastrophe happens. And there's this dog that's sort of accompanying the man, but as the man gets more and more irrational, the dog starts to back away and get suspicious. And then one of the last lines is the dog had the scent of death on the man and went off to where he could find, food and warmth, right? So my hero is a political science professor formerly from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He's now in Florida State. His name is Ryan Owens. He was at University of Wisconsin-Madison for more than a decade. And basically, he said the university's environment is toxic. He did some research which showed that 99% of donations from faculty in like a 10-year span went to Democratic candidates just to demonstrate this. He says, one of his quotes is, "But all too often, university leaders pretend as though there's no progressive orthodoxy that needs to be addressed," right? So like the dog in the story, to build a fire, the universities are getting more and more irrational and trying to save themselves.
The scent of death.
Yeah. The scent of death, and he walked along on the trail to Florida State in this case.
Yeah. I wonder if he feels university systems, to what we talked about earlier, are failing, or just particular aspects of one particular university.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I don't know.
But I think two things, again, can be true at the same time. So, no, I like that hero. And that's germane to what we were just talking about.
Yeah.
Well, Timmy, listen, have a wonderful week. Enjoy the NCAA tournament. Enjoy opening day. And again, answer that trivia question next week. Which pitcher has the most opening day starts in Major League Baseball history? And go Yankees, although no one's going to agree with me who isn't a Yankees fan. You should hate the Yankees if you're not a Yankees fan, but I am a diehard Yankees fan. And this is John Bowen signing off saying, hey, misbehave, drive fast, take chances.
And this is Tim saying there's plenty to learn out there that doesn't come from a university. If everybody likes what you're doing, you're probably not doing anything worthwhile. Take care out there.